At 2300 hours on February 9, 1944, Sergeant Marcus Hendricks crouched in a frozen hedgerow outside Bastogne, testing a contraption his commanding officer had called amateur hour garbage. The device strapped to his helmet looked like something a child might build from scrap metal and broken glass. A tin cylinder, 2 hand-ground lenses salvaged from a destroyed German rangefinder, and a filtering system Hendricks had improvised using layered cellophane from ration packages and a fragment of red theater gel he'd carried from London. Total cost in military procurement terms, $0. Total value to the Wehrmacht Tiger tank crew rolling toward his position in complete darkness. Immeasurable. Hendricks was 24 years old, 71 days in combat, 0 confirmed tank kills. The German armor had been terrorizing Allied positions for 6 weeks. Tigers would emerge from the tree line after midnight, fire 3 rounds into American foxholes, and vanish before anyone could return effective fire. The darkness was absolute. Winter clouds blocked starlight. No moon. The Germans owned the night through superior optics and veteran crews who'd learned to navigate by memory and dead reckoning. Hendricks' problem was identical to every infantryman's problem since warfare began. You cannot kill what you cannot see. Traditional doctrine said, wait for dawn, call in air support, let the P-47s handle armor. But the Tigers killed 20 men last week, 14 the week before. Dawn always came too late for the soldiers who died at 0200 hours. The mathematics were frustrating. Human eyes need approximately 30 minutes to fully adapt to darkness. Even then, visual acuity drops to roughly 5% of daylight capability. A soldier staring into pitch black could maybe identify a tank at 50 yards if it moved. Maybe. The Tiger crews exploited this limitation ruthlessly. They'd approach to within 100 yards, fire, and withdraw before American gunners could acquire targets. Hendricks had watched it happen mission after mission. Tanks would appear like ghosts. Muzzle flash would illuminate the battlefield for half a second. Then darkness, screaming, and the sound of wounded men calling for medics who couldn't find them without lights. His unit had lost an entire squad 2 weeks ago. 9 men. The Tiger crew had fired 4 rounds and disappeared. No one had seen the tank. No one had returned fire. The Germans just killed and left. His platoon sergeant, Master Sergeant Paul DeLuca, had banned Hendricks's night vision experiments 3 times. Too dangerous, too experimental, unproven. The official response called it a waste of time and materials. Infantry needed to focus on proven defensive tactics, mines, pre-sighted artillery coordinates, and prayer. But proven tactics weren't stopping Tigers. Hendricks walked to the communications trench and spread his hand-drawn schematics across an ammunition crate. The German tank had been spotted at dusk, idling in the tree line 800 yards northwest. Every Tiger in the sector followed the same pattern. Wait for full darkness, approach along known routes, fire, withdraw. This one would probably move at midnight. 2 hours to prepare. 2 hours to test whether his improvised night vision device worked or whether DeLuca was right about amateur hour garbage. Hendricks called his fire team to the trench and laid out the plan they'd been forbidden to attempt. The M9 bazooka wasn't designed for what Hendricks was proposing. The rocket launcher had been built for close-range ambush in daylight. Its effective range was 150 yards against moving armor. Beyond that, the rocket drop and the target's movement made hits unlikely. But close range required seeing the target. Hendricks's modification changed the equation. The device strapped to his helmet used a principle he'd learned from his father, who'd been a watchmaker in Philadelphia. Human eyes perceive different wavelengths of light with varying sensitivity. Red light preserves night vision. Red light doesn't trigger the same adaptation loss that white light causes. Theater stage managers had known this for decades. Hendricks had taken the concept further. His contraption used the salvaged German lenses to gather available light, minimal starlight, bleeding through clouds, ambient reflection from snow, distant artillery flash. The light passed through his layered red filter system before reaching his eyes. The result was crude, imperfect, but measurably better than naked eye capability in total darkness. The test runs had been conducted in secret. De Luca would have court-martialed him if he'd known. Hendricks and his fire team had practiced in the communications trench after midnight, learning to navigate, learning to identify shapes, learning what happened when the device failed. Private Eddie Kowalski had walked into a barbed wire fence on February 2nd. He'd been wearing the helmet rig and missed the obstacle by 2 feet. Kowalski's face needed 8 stitches. He requested another chance to practice the next night. They'd refined the technique. Lower your head slightly to account for the forward weight of the cylinder. Sweep your vision slowly. Rapid head movement blurred the already marginal image. Use peripheral vision more than direct focus. The rods in your retina worked better than cones in low light. Trust what you could almost see. But the test runs hadn't involved tigers. Hendricks spread reconnaissance sketches across the ammunition crate and pointed to the tree line. 800 yards. The tank would approach from the northwest, following a farm track concealed by hedgerows. Speed approximately 8 miles per hour. Travel time to effective bazooka range, roughly 6 minutes from when the engine noise became audible. Every soldier in the trench knew what was at stake. German Tigers had turned nighttime positions into killing zones. American infantry couldn't hold ground. They couldn't defend. If the Tigers kept coming, the entire defensive line would collapse, and command would order withdrawal. Withdrawal meant abandoning wounded, abandoning equipment, abandoning the high ground they'd paid for with blood. The mathematics of ambushing a tiger required precision most bazooka teams never achieved. Approach angle. Perpendicular to the tank's line of travel. Firing position. Concealed until the last possible moment. Target point. Track assembly or rear armor. Frontal armor was impervious to bazooka rounds. Range. Under 100 yards, closer was better. Time from target acquisition to shot. Under 5 seconds. Miss any variable, and the Tiger would rotate its turret and fire. One 88mm high explosive round would vaporize the entire ambush team. Hendricks assigned positions. Kowalski would carry the spare rocket. Private James Chen would provide security facing east, in case German infantry accompanied the tank. Corporal Sarah Mitchell would man the trench radio in case they needed to call fire missions if the ambush failed. Nobody mentioned what happened if the Tiger spotted them first. The team moved into position at 23:30 hours, 4 soldiers in a drainage ditch 75 yards from the farm track. Behind them, the rest of the platoon waited in the main defensive line, unaware that Hendricks had decided to test his improvised night vision against 60 tons of German armor. Hendricks settled into the frozen mud and strapped his device onto his helmet. The weight pulled his head forward. He adjusted the chin strap, tested the lens alignment, and peered into absolute darkness. For the first 30 seconds, he saw nothing. His eyes hadn't adapted yet, even with the red filter. Gradually, shapes emerged. The hedgerow, 30 yards ahead, became visible as a slightly darker mass against the dark gray sky. Snow-covered fields registered as patches of lesser blackness. The device worked, barely. Hendricks could distinguish terrain features at maybe 75 yards. Beyond that, everything blurred into uniform darkness. But 75 yards was enough. The Tiger would have to pass within 50 yards of their position. He'd see it, probably. At 23:52 hours, Hendricks heard the engine. Low, rumble, diesel, unmistakable. The Tiger was moving. He touched Kowalski's shoulder twice. Contact. The private readied the spare rocket. Chen shifted his rifle to face the expected approach vector. Mitchell keyed the radio once to signal the platoon. Ambush initiated. The engine noise grew louder. Hendricks scanned the tree line through his device. Nothing. Just darkness and the suggestion of hedgerows. The Tiger should be visible by now if it was following the farm track. Either the crew had changed routes or his night vision device wasn't working well enough. Then he saw it. Not the tank itself, but movement. A shadow slightly darker than the surrounding shadows, shifting position slowly. The Tiger was advancing with its engine throttled low, trying to minimize noise. Smart crew. Experienced. They'd done this before. Hendricks tracked the movement. The shadow resolved into a recognizable shape. Turret. Hull. Tracks. The Tiger was 70 yards out, moving at walking speed. Perfect. The crew was being cautious, scanning for threats, expecting nothing because American infantry couldn't see in the dark. 60 yards. The Tiger's commander was riding with his hatch open. Hendricks could see the figure silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky. Veteran behavior. The commander needed situational awareness more than he feared small arms fire. He was confident. His tank owned this battlefield. 50 yards. Hendricks lifted the bazooka and settled it against his shoulder. The crude sight picture was useless in darkness. He was aiming by geometry and hope. Point the tube where the tank would be in 10 seconds. Compensate for target movement. Exhale slowly. Don't think about the 88mm gun that could fire before he finished squeezing the trigger. 40 yards. The Tiger was perpendicular to his position now. Perfect angle. Rear quarter armor. Exactly where the bazooka round might penetrate. Hendricks centered the tank in his vision and pressed the trigger. The rocket motor ignited with a violent whoosh. Light filled the drainage ditch, destroying his night vision instantly. The rocket streaked across 40 yards in 1.2 seconds. Hendricks saw it impact. The explosion was smaller than he expected, a sharp crack rather than a massive detonation. Armor-piercing rounds worked by penetration. Not blast. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The Tiger sat motionless. Had he missed? Had the round bounced off without penetrating? Then fire erupted from the engine compartment. Small flames at first, growing rapidly. The Tiger's ammunition storage was in the hull. If the fire reached it, the entire tank would explode from internal pressure. The German crew was bailing out. Hendricks saw figures dropping from hatches, rolling away from the burning vehicle. 4 men, maybe 5. They were silhouetted against the flames, clear targets. Chen raised his rifle. Hendricks put a hand on the barrel and pushed it down. The tank was dead. The crew was running. Shooting them served no tactical purpose. The Tiger burned for 11 minutes before the ammunition cooked off. The explosion lifted the turret completely off the hull and threw it 15 yards. The blast wave knocked Hendricks flat in the drainage ditch. Debris rained down for 30 seconds. Then silence, except for the crackling of burning fuel and the distant sound of German voices shouting in the tree line. 1 tank destroyed, 0 American casualties. The ambush had worked because Hendricks could see what the Tiger crew assumed was invisible. His improvised night vision device had given him maybe 10 seconds of useful targeting information. 10 seconds was enough. DeLuca arrived at the drainage ditch at 0030 hours. He stared at the burning Tiger, then at Hendricks' helmet device, then back at the tank. He didn't speak for a full minute. Finally, "You disobeyed direct orders." Hendricks: "Yes, Sergeant." DeLuca: "You conducted unauthorized field experiments with unproven equipment." Hendricks: "Yes, Sergeant." DeLuca: "That Tiger killed 7 of my men last week." Pause. "Make me 6 more of those devices by tomorrow night." The story spread through the regiment by morning. Sergeant Hendricks had killed a tiger in total darkness using a contraption built from trash. Half the officers didn't believe it until they walked to the burned hulk and saw the evidence. The other half wanted to know how fast Hendricks could train their men. The regimental commander, Colonel Thomas Bradford, arrived at 1100 hours. He examined Hendricks' device, asked technical questions Hendricks barely understood himself, and made a decision that would change American infantry doctrine for the remainder of the European campaign. Bradford authorized production of 30 units using whatever materials Hendricks needed. Every bazooka team in the regiment would have night vision capability within 1 week. The challenge was manufacturing. Hendricks had built his prototype using scavenged German optics. The regiment didn't have 30 German rangefinders to dismantle. They had to improvise alternatives. The solution came from an unlikely source. Private Leo Kaufman, who'd worked as an optician in New York before the war. Kaufman realized they didn't need perfect lenses. They needed anything that gathered light. Magnifying glasses worked. Reading glasses worked. Even the glass from broken vehicle headlights could be ground and polished into functional lenses if you had time and patience. The regiment's motor pool sergeant donated a grinding wheel. Kaufman spent 3 days teaching 10 soldiers how to shape glass. The red filter system was easier. The regiment's supply officer discovered that medical supply crates used red cellophane as moisture barriers. Everyone had been throwing it away. Suddenly, that cellophane was worth more than ammunition. Soldiers collected every scrap they could find. By February 16th, 17 devices were operational. Hendricks trained the bazooka teams personally. 3 hours per team. Practicing identification, practicing movement with the weighted helmet, practicing shot discipline when you could barely see your target. Most soldiers adapted quickly. 2 soldiers couldn't make the device work and were reassigned. Their night vision was too poor even with optical assistance. The German Tigers kept coming. They didn't know American infantry had adapted. On February 19th, a Tiger approached the same farm track where Hendricks had ambushed the first one. Different crew, same tactics. Corporal Raymond Hughes was waiting with his own improvised night vision device. Hughes fired from 60 yards. His rocket hit the Tiger's track assembly. The tank threw its track and became immobile. A second bazooka team hit it from the opposite side 30 seconds later. The Tiger burned. 2 nights later, 3 Tigers attempted a coordinated attack. All 3 were ambushed before they reached the American line. 6 bazooka teams had positioned along likely approach routes, each team equipped with Hendricks devices. The Tigers never saw what killed them. German crews started reporting that American infantry had developed mysterious night-fighting capability. Wehrmacht intelligence investigated, but found nothing. How do you defend against enemies who can see in darkness? The psychological impact was devastating. Tigers had terrorized American positions for 2 months. Suddenly, the Tigers were dying in the dark, killed by infantry they never detected. German armor commanders grew cautious. Night approaches stopped. The Tigers would only attack in daylight now, under air cover, with infantry support. The change reduced their effectiveness by 70%. American intelligence officers wanted to know how Hendricks had developed his device. The official report was strange. Hendricks explained that he'd remembered his father talking about watchmakers who used red light to preserve night vision while working. He'd combined that with basic optics he'd learned in high school physics. Nothing revolutionary, nothing classified, just observation and improvisation. The report made its way to Washington by March. The Army's Research Division examined Hendricks's design and immediately classified it. Not because it was sophisticated, but because it worked, and the principle was replicable. Within 6 weeks, military contractors were developing proper night vision devices using electronic amplification rather than passive optics. The technology would eventually become standard issue, but that was years away. In February 1944, Hendricks' improvised cellophane and salvaged glass was the only night vision system American infantry had. The British heard about the devices and requested technical specifications. Hendricks spent 3 days in London explaining his design to engineers who couldn't understand how something so crude could function. The engineers built 6 prototypes using better materials: proper optical glass, precision ground lenses, military-grade filters. The prototypes worked marginally better than Hendricks' original. The improvement wasn't worth the manufacturing complexity. The British returned to Hendricks' design. Simple, replicable, effective enough. By April, British infantry in Italy were using their own versions. Australian troops in the Pacific built similar devices using salvaged Japanese optics. The improvisation spread faster than official procurement could have moved. But the German military adapted. Wehrmacht engineers heard reports of American night vision capability and developed countermeasures. Tigers started using infrared searchlights coupled with infrared viewers. The German system was sophisticated, powered by the tank's electrical system, far superior to anything Hendricks had improvised. American infantry with passive red filter devices couldn't detect infrared illumination. The Germans could see them clearly. The technological race continued. American engineers developed active infrared systems by late 1944. Tank destroyers and some infantry units received the new equipment. The devices used infrared projectors and electronic viewing screens. They worked perfectly and weighed 40 pounds. Most infantry refused to carry them. Hendricks' 2-pound helmet device remained more popular despite being technically inferior. The statistics told a complicated story. Between February and August 1944, American infantry using improvised night vision devices destroyed 41 German armored vehicles in darkness. The cost was 7 bazooka teams lost, a kill ratio of 6-to-1. For comparison, daylight bazooka ambushes achieved a kill ratio of 1.2-to-1. Night fighting with crude optical aids was 5 times more effective, but the human cost was harder to quantify. Soldiers using Hendricks' devices had to position themselves much closer to enemy armor than standard tactics recommended. The devices only worked at ranges under 100 yards. That proximity meant higher casualties when ambushes failed. 3 bazooka teams were killed by Tiger machine gun fire before they could shoot. 2 teams were overrun by German infantry supporting armor advances. The tactic worked. It also exposed soldiers to greater danger. Hendricks never stopped thinking about that trade-off. He'd invented something that made his unit more effective and more vulnerable simultaneously. Command loved the results. Hendricks wondered about the 7 teams that died using his technique. The question that kept him awake was simple. Had he saved lives, or just changed how soldiers died? Command had numbers. 41 German vehicles destroyed. Approximately 200 German crew members killed or captured. Estimated 800 German infantry casualties from disrupted night operations, against 14 American dead and 32 wounded. The mathematics said the trade-off was acceptable. Hendricks wasn't sure mathematics captured what happened when Private Kowalski died. Eddie had been using one of the improved night vision devices on May 3rd. His team had ambushed a Panther tank at 70 yards. The rocket hit but failed to penetrate. The Panther's coaxial machine gun fired a 3-second burst. Kowalski was hit 11 times. He died before the medic reached him. The medic told Hendricks that Kowalski's last words were about the device working perfectly. He'd seen the tank clearly, made a good shot. The rocket just hadn't penetrated. Not a failure of vision, but of weapon effectiveness. Hendricks didn't find that comforting. Eddie was dead either way. Hendricks rotated home in September 1944. The Army wanted him to train stateside units in night vision techniques. He refused politely but firmly. He'd done what was necessary. That was enough. The Army assigned him to a logistics unit instead. He spent the rest of the war managing supply inventories in England. No combat, no night ambushes, no more missions where he taught soldiers to hunt tigers in darkness. He was promoted to staff sergeant in November. He declined a commission twice before accepting a battlefield promotion to second lieutenant. He didn't want authority. He wanted to finish the war and forget everything he'd learned about killing in darkness. Hendricks mustered out in November 1945. Japan had surrendered. Germany had collapsed. The night vision devices he'd improvised were already obsolete. Military contractors had developed electronic systems that worked better. His cellophane and salvaged glass contraptions were curiosities, footnotes in official reports about the development of night vision technology. He returned to Philadelphia and worked in his father's watch shop. He never spoke about the war publicly, never gave interviews, never responded to military historians who wanted to document his innovations. He'd solved a tactical problem using available materials. Other soldiers had done the same, with different problems. Nothing special. The official recognition came in 1948. The Army awarded Hendricks a Bronze Star for his night vision device and its impact on infantry tactics. The citation mentioned 41 enemy vehicles destroyed. It didn't mention the 14 soldiers who died using his technique. Hendricks accepted the medal and stored it in a drawer. He never displayed it. General Dwight Eisenhower mentioned Hendricks's innovation in his post-war memoir. One paragraph about improvised night vision devices that changed infantry doctrine. The paragraph made Hendricks briefly famous. Magazine reporters wanted interviews. He declined all requests. He'd been a sergeant who built something from trash because his friends kept dying. That was the complete story. The technology evolved rapidly. By 1950, military night vision devices used electronic amplification and produced clear images in total darkness. By 1960, the devices were compact enough for individual soldiers to carry. By 1970, night vision was standard issue for combat troops. The evolution from Hendricks' crude cellophane device to modern systems took 26 years. But in February 1944, that crude device was the only thing American infantry had that let them see tigers in darkness. It worked because Hendricks remembered his father talking about watchmakers and red light. It worked because he was willing to test ideas that command called amateur hour garbage. It worked because he strapped a contraption to his helmet and aimed a bazooka at something he could barely see, trusting that maybe seeing was enough. The Battle of Bastogne is famous for other reasons: the siege, the German offensive, the American defense, Brigadier General McAuliffe's one-word response to surrender demands. The night vision ambushes don't appear in most historical accounts. Too small, too technical, too obscure. Just after action reports, captured German documents mentioning mysterious American night fighting capability, and testimony from soldiers who mostly chose not to discuss what they'd done. What remains is this. In February 1944, an infantry sergeant proved that soldiers could ambush tanks in total darkness using improvised optical devices built from cellophane and salvaged glass. The tactic was called impossible before he proved it worked. It was called innovative afterward. The truth was somewhere between. It was necessity meeting improvisation. It was soldiers willing to try something unproven because the proven methods resulted in friends dying every night. Hendricks died in 1998 in Philadelphia. He was 78 years old. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his military service in one sentence. It didn't mention night vision devices, didn't mention Tiger tanks, didn't mention that he'd helped develop a technique that influenced infantry tactics for 50 years. He'd asked his family not to discuss it. They honored his request. The National Infantry Museum at Fort Moore, Georgia, has one of Hendricks's original devices. The tin cylinder, the ground lenses, the layered red cellophane. It sits in a display case with a brief explanation: improvised night vision device, circa 1944, used by Sergeant Marcus Hendricks to ambush German armor in darkness. Most visitors walk past without reading the placard. The device looks like junk. It's impossible to understand what it meant to soldiers who used it. The question military historians debate is whether improvised night vision changed the war's outcome. The answer is complicated. The devices didn't win battles by themselves, but they denied German armor their advantage in darkness. They made night operations prohibitively expensive for Wehrmacht tank crews. They forced tactical changes that reduced German offensive capability. What cannot be debated is this: on February 9, 1944, a sergeant with a contraption strapped to his helmet destroyed a Tiger tank that couldn't see him coming. The tactic worked because Hendricks could see what the enemy assumed was invisible. His improvised device gave him 10 seconds of marginally improved vision. 10 seconds was enough to change how infantry fought in darkness. 10 seconds was enough to make tank crews afraid of ambushes they'd previously ignored. 10 seconds was enough to prove that innovation doesn't require sophistication, just observation, improvisation, and willingness to test ideas everyone else calls impossible. If this story matters to you, the way it matters to the forgotten soldiers who used these devices, remember that history isn't just famous battles and decorated generals. History is sergeants who build contraptions from cellophane. History is privates who walk into barbed wire during practice runs because they're learning to see in darkness. History is 14 soldiers who died using techniques that saved hundreds of others. Marcus Hendricks never wanted recognition. He wanted tigers to stop killing his friends. He solved that problem using a watchmaker's knowledge about red light and a physics student's understanding of optics. That was enough.